So now that we've got all of our sounds isolated, we're ready to bounce these out as audio tracks. Before we do that, let's talk about why I think it's a good practice to do this. To begin with, if I get this playing, let's go to a heavy section. I know it sounds terrible, but if we look at the CPU usage, why that's running, this is a pretty powerful computer that I'm working on, and we're running ScreenFlow simultaneously with this. So the computer is already taxed quite a bit, but you can see it's running at around 20% CPU usage. And as soon as I start to pile on some really high-end audio plugins to really make this mix sound great, I'm going to need as much CPU power as I can to avoid running into any problems down the road. So that's reason number one, that as soon as I export all of these as audio tracks and I bring them in as audio files into a new project, the computer's not going to have to devote any processing power to synthesizing these sounds in real time. We can devote all that processing power to mixing and mastering these sounds. The second reason is for giving yourself both a mental as well as physical break from the track. The ideal world is that you've got somebody else that can mix and master your tracks for you. But in most cases, and especially in today's music industry, you've got to be able to do all this stuff by yourself and for yourself, at least as you get started. So this is a really necessary skill. But what I mean by giving yourself both a physical as well as mental break from the track is that the ears are like any other muscle, that if you use them all day long, they're going to get tired and you're not going to be able to hear with the same clarity or the same focus that you could when you start with fresh ears. The second reason of kind of the mental break is that, especially for me, my imagination is so much a part of the compositional process that by the time I'm nearly done with a track, I've spent so much time imagining how it could or could not be that when I'm hearing it, I'm hearing kind of equal balances between what's actually there and what I'm imagining to be there, or how I'm imagining the sounds to be. So my imagination is really kind of distorting how I'm hearing the track. So taking that time to both export these tracks out of there kind of enforces on you a break from this track, at least until the day that computers are super fast. But for now, it takes a little bit of time, especially if it's a larger project. So it gives you that chance to kind of step back, take a break, take off your headphones or turn down the volume and let your ears relax, recover a little bit, as well as let yourself kind of forget about the track. So I'd strongly recommend that once you do this, maybe even go for a walk or put the track aside for a couple of days if you don't have a deadline to meet, and really give yourself that break. But let's press forward. Let's export these tracks and talk about that process. So the first step is to select the duration of time that I want to export. And I always like to give myself some time at the end of the track here. So that way, if there's any reverb or really long release or decay on some of these sounds, we capture that in the bounces themselves, and we've got plenty of space at the end. It's usually also a good practice to give yourself some time at the beginning of the project as well, just so we don't accidentally lose anything in the export process. So let's go ahead and tag in a couple bars here at the beginning as well. So let's put my cursor at the beginning, go up to Create, Insert Silence. The shortcut there is Command-I. And let's just put in one full bar at the beginning there. Okay. You can see it's shifted everything over there, so now I've got one bar of silence at the beginning there, and we can drag this out. Let's go all the way out to bar 153, then I go up to File, Export, and this is a really nice feature of that. I can select what I want to export. I can do the master channel, which is the stereo mix of the overall track, all individual tracks, selected tracks only, or any of the independent isolated tracks in here, so I can see all the tracks that I've currently got in there. And I'm going to say all individual tracks. Then just double check that it's going from bar 1, beat 1, division 1, all the way out to the very end of bar 152, which is the very beginning of bar 153. Don't need to render this as a loop. That would put tiny little fade in and fades out if I was exporting like a beat or melody or something like that I wanted to use as a loop in another project. Then the audio type should always be, we don't have any other options other than WAV or AFF. Both are lossless, meaning we're not losing any data. It's all the zeros and ones that we've generated in this process. So either of these are fine. Growing up with Macs, I'm more accustomed to seeing the AIFF. Then we'll always stick with the sample rate that we're currently working at. You don't want to jump down at this process. We want to keep these at full fidelity or full detail here. So I'm currently working at 44,100, so I'm going to leave it at that. In Ableton, you can tell that by a little speaker icon lets you know what sample rate you're currently working at. And then bit depth, I'll leave this at the maximum possible so we don't lose any data again. And then I'll also leave this create analysis file. What this does is, as it exports each of these individual tracks, it's going to go through and analyze and give us a waveform for each of those as it's taking that or exporting that audio file out, which is just going to speed up the process when we bring those audio files back in. Normalization, or this normalize button, is something that I would encourage you to never click. What that does is it scans through all the audio files that we're outputting in this export process, and then it identifies the loudest moment in the track, and then it either turns up the volume on the overall track or turns down the volume on the overall track to bring that to the maximum level that we could have it at without creating any digital distortion. So while that might sound really useful, the problem with that is that it's going to make the tracks come out of here sounding different than the way that they sound now. So the uses for this would be if you were sketching out an idea, you wanted to be able to bounce it out really quick and play it back on your phone or play it back on your car stereo or send it to a friend and make sure that it at least sounded loud enough without any distortion for them to be able to hear the idea. That might be when you would click on that. It's kind of like a quick and dirty mastering of your project. But in general, the computer is not a musician. I'm the musician. I want to be the one making the musical choices about this track. So I'm not going to select that button. I could convert this to mono if I needed to. Maybe this was a dance track that I was going to be sending out to the clubs and it needed to be mono. I could select that one, upload it to SoundCloud if need be, and there's no video in this project, so I don't have to worry about any of that. So now when I click this export button, it's going to start thinking. It's going to ask me first, where do I want to send it to? And I've already created inside of my project folder a bounces folder. And I usually create inside of that folder another one called stems. And then inside of there, you can see I've already got a version number for this day, another project or another folder in there. So let's create another folder for our new version, 2016.05.22.version02. Create. And then we'll name these tracks or give the file extension here as mellow is, as yellow does, stems. That way I know all of these, and then it's going to have that full extension and then a space and then the name of the track following that name. So this is going to ensure that I can always identify that here they are in my stems folder, but even if somehow they fall out of that stems folder in the future, I'll know that they're associated with this track. They're the stems, they were created on this day, they were the version of that day, and that they were this track of all of that. So lots of information packed into that title that's all helping to avoid any chaos in the future. So I'll click save, it's going to be exporting. Now is when I take off my headphones or turn down the volume, go for a walk, grab a beer, give myself a break or something, so that when I come back to this, my ears and my mind are fresh to start tackling it. So we're almost to the mixing stage.